ESPN Sports Radio 1392.5.
Now for something completely different.
We're going to bring it all together.
Because that's the bottom line.
ESPN Radio 1392.5. It's the bottom line with Brad Taylor, presented by Stable Duel. Sports talk from a handicapping perspective. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Saturday. 859-381-1313. That's the number to call if you'd like to join in the conversation. You can email the show anytime, bottomlinelex@gmail.com. And you can follow us on Twitter at bottomlinelex. On today's show, the NBA playoffs continue, and the favorites continue to roll on, as we've been begging you to take for about a month now. Some well-known and respected members of the media in the desert are chiming in on Kentucky's football fortunes for the coming season. We will have details here in this first segment. Later on, about 9:30, 9:35 or so, Vince Stover of the Sports Stove podcast will join us to talk all things sports, including his red-hot UFC picks for tonight. And, of course, about 9:25, the most profitable segment in Lexington radio, our Mac Daddy Stogie Picks, presented by Jake's Cigar Bar. All that and much, much more coming up on this week's Saturday edition of Lexington's fastest-growing sports talk radio experience. But first, the Nasty Boys. We refer to these guys on the show from time to time, but we've never really talked about them in depth. In the Reds' 1990 World Series championship season, the Reds had a future Hall of Famer on their team. His name was Barry Larkin. Jose Rijo was winning the World Series MVP. The third baseman, Chris Sabo, before he started loading his bat with illegal whatevers, he was being compared to a beer-drinking dog named Spuds McKenzie. And the Reds wore Sansabelt pants. So yes, life was good in 1990. But times have changed. The Reds won the World Series because they had one of the most productive bullpens in Major League history. Norm Charlton, Rob Dibble, Randy Myers. They were the most intimidating bullpen, both on and off the mound, quite possibly in Major League history. And unlike many old wives' tales of baseball heroes from an age gone by, the analytics and the numbers back them up. Of the top 8 players on that 1990 Reds team in WAR, wins above replacement, the Nasty Boys were 3 of the top 8 players on the team in wins above replacement, and you don't see that ever from anyone. You don't see 3 relief pitchers among the top 8 in WAR. You just don't. But most people remember, of the 3, Rob Dibble the most, and rightly so. But he wasn't even truly the closer on that 1990 team. It was Randy Myers. But Rob Dibble was the best relief pitcher the Reds ever had over a 3-year span. And yes, that includes people like Aroldis Chapman. In fact, in the history of Major League Baseball, only 30 relief pitchers have recorded a WAR stat of over 3.3 in a season. And Rob Dibble has 3 of those 30 seasons. Hall of Famers, Bruce Sutter, Goose Gossage, they have 2. So it tells you how good Rob Dibble was for a 3-year stretch, right around that World Series time. But things quickly ended for Dibble, which was kind of easy to see coming, with the style of his pitching and just the way guys were used out of the bullpen in that day and age. Rob Dibble pitched 98 innings in the 1990 regular season, and that doesn't even include the playoffs. If a relief pitcher threw 98 innings today, they'd throw the manager in jail for abuse. But as predictably you could see it back then, Rob Dibble was out of Cincinnati by the age of 29, out of Major League Baseball by 31. Just 4 years after putting up 3 of the best seasons in succession that a relief pitcher ever put up. The combination of Dibble, Randy Myers, Norm Charlton, that was a bullpen for the ages, regardless of franchise. In fact, Dibble and Myers were co-MVPs of the National League Championship Series against the Pirates that season, when many of the Pirates admitted that they knew the games were over if they got through 5 innings and they weren't ahead, because they were not going to make a comeback against those 3 guys coming out of that bullpen. But it quickly ended for the Reds in that bullpen after that season. Injuries, misuse. Both Charlton and Myers in 1991, they were used as starting pitchers the next season. Randy Myers would go on to be a fireman of the year. He'd go on to save 50 games in a season, again, after he left Cincinnati. But the year after getting 31 saves on a World Series champion, they put Randy Myers in the starting rotation for 12 games. And he wasn't very good. They took him out of what he was good at. And they put Norm Charlton in the starting rotation too. He started 11 games the next year. So you wonder why a team like the Reds, who had so much potential after 1990 because everybody was young. There was nobody on that team in 1990 that was over the age of 30 that played a huge part in it. But misuse, especially out of the guys out of that bullpen. Myers and Charlton started games in 1991. By 1992, they were gone. Why would they want to sit around and get started when they want to be out of the bullpen and that was their best thing? And they tried to move Rob Dibble to the de facto closer, and it never worked out for him. I still remember a Sunday night game in New York. I still remember it. And he jerked his jersey off and just threw it in the crowd because he was so bad. It was never the same for any of those relief pitchers after they left Cincinnati. Although they had success. Norm Charlton went on to success with Lou Piniella in Seattle. But it never was the same for those guys. It never was the same for that team. And the Reds, it took a few years to get back to the playoffs just because they didn't know how to manage all that young talent they had, and they mismanaged it. So needless to say, that 1990 bullpen is a far cry from this year's Reds bullpen. Let's go to this year. The 1990 bullpen, seriously a far cry from what you saw in 1990 than you see today. The Reds currently 30-31, desperately holding on for a dear life in a division where it looks like there's going to be 4 teams that go into September with a pulse, trying to hopscotch back and forth to try to win this division. But the Reds got some terrible news yesterday as bullpen ace, using the term ace very loosely with the rest of these guys, TJ Antone hits the injured list. Antone on the season has been absolutely terrific. A 1.41 ERA in 32 innings pitched. He has been as good as any pitcher, quite possibly, in the National League in terms of bullpen overall use, maybe not in the save department. But 32 innings at 1.41 is very good. But with him out for at least 10 days, the rest of this bullpen is now on the spot. And if the first 2 months of this season are any indication, they're in big trouble. And one other thing that has to annoy the Reds nation about this move that Antone going to the injured list, there was no corresponding move made at the time. I wonder what that's all about, other than money. Or are they trying to decide whether to bring young Hunter Green, who is throwing over 100 miles an hour regularly in the minors, up to see if he can change anything, to see if it's worth wasting a year of being able to hold on to him down the road. With this decision-making group, anything is possible, especially putting the short term over the long term and trying to save their phony baloney jobs. But how bad has the Red bullpen been this season? Really bad. And I mean really bad. Let's just look at the ERAs of these pitchers that are currently active and available out of the Reds bullpen. Alleged closer, Lucas Sims, 5.01. It's exactly what you want from your closer. The guy allegedly supposed to come in at the end and finish things off, a 5.01 ERA. The Reds have 2 guys that have thrown less than 10 innings this year, Art Warren and Ashton Goudeau. So they're not really into it. But here's where it gets ugly. The guys who've been around for a while. Ryan Hendricks, 4.91 ERA. Sean Doolittle, 4.98. Brad Brock, 5.14. Heath Hembry, who looked good at first, But now he's up to 5.50. And, of course, opening day closer Amir Garrett, 9.17. We talked about Garrett a lot this season. And is he completely to blame for all this? No, it's not all him. It's a lot him, but it's not all him. But Amir Garrett is an absolute disaster right now. So when this bullpen is called upon, look at the garbage they had to choose from. Nobody with more than 7 innings pitched out of that bullpen this season has an ERA basically under 5. And there are 3 bullpens in Major League Baseball with an ERA over 5 collectively. Detroit, 5.18, and their record is 26-37. Bad team. Colorado, 5.45, who plays at Coors Field and has the worst road record in Major League Baseball, as we saw yesterday. And then the Reds, 5.88. Almost a run per game, a half run per game, more than the Rockies. Oh, this must be the worst bullpen in the history of the franchise. No, not even close. Oh, the worst this century then. We're talking about those old times. No, we're not. In 2016, the Reds had the worst pitching staff in Major League Baseball history, if you look at the WAR statistic. In 2016, are the only pitching staff, the Reds are, that had a WAR under 0. The next worst is the 1915 Philadelphia Athletics. They had 0.3 on the positive side. You remember those 1915 A's. Yeah, I'm sure you do. Yeah. But that's the logic of the theory of war. You can get sub-replacement members that could have just stacked the entire pitching staff with nothing but fringe players and AAA call-ups, and you would have had an additional game 1 in 2016. So, in other words, to put it in layman's terms, you just could have gotten guys from out of the stands to pitch, and you probably would have won one more game in 2016. Incredible. But this bullpen, if you're going to try to compete down the stretch, and the Reds are doing so, they're starting to hit the ball. You can see the offense coming around now. Their hitting numbers going up, especially getting these games at home. If they're going to have to compete in this division, they're going to have to get something for their bullpen or make some moves to help that bullpen, because what they have now is not going to get it done. But if the Nasty Boys of 1990 taught us anything, a great bullpen can carry a team to places that nobody expected. And if the 2021 edition of the Reds doesn't do something about their bullpen soon, the 1998 Reds will continue to age like a fine wine, with fans wondering if they'll ever see another World Series in Cincinnati again in their lifetimes. And that's the bottom line. ESPN Radio 1392.5, The Bottom Line with Brad Taylor, presented by Stable Duel. Sports talk from a handicapping perspective. Last night at Great America Ballpark, a game you could have heard right here on ESPN Radio, the Reds walked all over the Rockies 11-4 in a game where Tyler Mahle was a minus 200 favorite. I hope he saves some screenshots of that, because I doubt he'll ever be that heavy of a favorite again in his life. He could be playing beer league softball. He wouldn't be a minus 200 favorite, I can promise you. But how do you know the Reds don't believe in their bullpen? After 5 innings last night, the Reds were up 9-0. Sometimes in this situation, a manager will get the starter out just to save his innings because he's already qualified for the win, so he's good. But with this bullpen, manager David Bell had no choice but to run Mahle out there for the 6th inning and let him get tagged for 4 earned runs to ruin an otherwise great start. So the closing line on Mahle, 4 earned runs in 6 innings pitched, not even a quality start, but in essence, he took one for the team last night. Shockingly, the Reds' bullpen only gave up 1 earned run in 3 innings to preserve that win. Speaking of David Bell, it does seem that he's settled on a lineup for the time being that consists of Jonathan India leading off, Joey Votto batting 5th, and our good friend Eugenio Suarez batting 6th. That's a better lineup than they had when Suarez was leading off. Sheesh, that was terrible. But Suarez did get a hit last night to raise his average to a robust for him anyway, 163. After Suarez got that hit, Bell pinch hit for him immediately, so Suarez could not ruin his 1-for-3 night. But today at Great America Ballpark, another game you can hear right here on ESPN Radio 1392.5. Game 2 of this Titanic series will take place as Colorado sends German Marquez to the mound, 4-5 with a 3.91 ERA, while the Reds send Wade Miley to the bump, 5-4, 2.96 ERA. These two pitchers faced off against each other on May 14th in Colorado at Coors Field. Marquez allowed 4 earned runs in 6 innings, got the win. Miley, coming off his no-hitter the previous start, allowed 8 earned runs in 3 innings. And after that game, he went on the injured list. Marquez for the Rockies. He's actually a very good pitcher. In each of the last 5 seasons, he has an ERA plus of over 100, where ERA plus factors in your home field. In other words, Coors Field gets deleted out in all those. And not only that, but Marquez cashes tickets in the desert. The Rockies have a lifetime record 68-51 when Marquez hits the mound. If you put $1 blindly on him, you would have brought home $13.66 in his lifetime for a return on investment of 11.5%. That's very good. But in today's scenario, he's even more valuable in the desert. An underdog on the road like he is today, when that happens, Colorado is 24-20 when Marquez is in this spot for a 26.7 return on investment. Outstanding. Absolutely outstanding. Wade Miley, a tough pitcher to handicap in his time as a Red. We've seen, even this year, one start, a no-hitter. The next start, 8 runs in 3 innings. 14 career starts for the Reds Miley has. The Reds are 7-7 in those starts. And he's 3-4 at Great American Ballpark. Not much of a sample size. And even with that small sample size, we can't put a thumb on what to expect from Wade Miley. The Reds are a minus 130 favorite in this one. If this number went down to about 120, I think we'd go Reds. But minus 130 is just too much, especially with that bullpen. You're not getting a lot of value. Usually we will look to see the bullpens, who pitched the previous night, things like that. Well, with this Reds bullpen, is it really worth looking to see who pitched last night? Is it really worth it? Because that bullpen, they're all terrible anyway. What does it even matter? Add to that, not much discernible difference between the two starting pitchers, and you have a line that better be minus 20 or below before I take the Reds. And I don't think you'll see the line drop that low. So this game's probably a pass for us, but good luck if you're on the Reds today. That's the bottom line. ESPN Radio 1300, 92.5. Bottom line with Brad Taylor, presented by Stable Duel. Sports talk from a handicapping perspective. Kentucky football getting some buzz out in the desert this week. I was listening to an interview of Chris Andrews, a longtime odds maker in Las Vegas and current sportsbook director at the South Point Casino out in Vegas. He said something very interesting about Kentucky football this week. Andrews posted win totals at the South Point for the season in conference games only. Not for the overall win totals, but for conference games. Most books have been putting up season win totals on their entire schedules. South Point says conference game only. So that's when you see Alabama at 7.5. People must think it's crazy until you look at it and say, oh, wait, Alabama's only playing 8 conference games. And it doesn't include an SEC championship game. So, yeah, 7.5 is the number you have to put up if you're an odds maker. And for those of you wondering, Kentucky's conference-only win total out in this at the South Point in Vegas, 4.5. Keep in mind, this is a program that has won 5 SEC games once in the last 44 years. That should tell you something right there. But Chris Andrews, the sportsbook director that put up all these props, was adamant about one team getting all the buzz about his numbers, and that team was Kentucky. What? You mean Kentucky's getting buzz out in the desert? Kentucky football. Well, I'm going to quote Chris Andrews here and what he said, and I quote, "What I found so interesting, I got more response on one team, Kentucky. I had so many people coming in mostly saying that's a bad number. Clearly you don't know what you're talking about, and you're nuts when I put up that line. Kentucky's going to win more than 4 games. How could I do that? How could I put up such a bad line?" And then Andrews participates. I mean, Kentucky football? When did you ever see such passion from Kentucky football fans? I mean, if it was Kentucky basketball, I would be thoroughly understanding. But Kentucky football? Where did all this passion come from? You should go see my timeline and see all these Kentucky fans and what they've been saying. It's unbelievable. This is a sportsbook director out in Las Vegas who cannot believe that the Big Blue Nation is so irate that he only has 4.5 conference wins for their beloved Kentucky football games. But the key part of all this, he added after this that all the people telling him that it's a bad number, they don't have any money on it. So it's easy to go down there and say these things, but nobody's putting their money where their mouths are. So how can you really say that it is a worthy thing to be saying? The biggest wager he said that he had on the Kentucky prop was a $100 bet, and that was actually under the 4.5 SEC wins. So even though the Kentucky people are complaining about the number, they are not putting their hard-earned money on it. I wonder why that is. Maybe because they've seen this movie before and remember how it ends. Just maybe. But it doesn't end there. I also heard Chris Felica. You may know him from ESPN Game Day. He has a sports gambling podcast as well where they focus on college football. He went to bat for Kentucky football this week. Felica likes Kentucky to go over 6.5 or 7 wins, depending on where you can get it right now. Quoting Felica, one over I do like this year is Kentucky. If you look at their first 3 games against Louisiana Monroe, Missouri, and Chattanooga, all at home, they should win those. They should also win their last 3 games at Vandy, New Mexico State, and at Louisville. If they can win all 6 of those games, you're telling me they can't find another win, another 1 or 2 wins somewhere amongst South Carolina, Tennessee, Mississippi State? If that's the case, I'm going to keep playing the over, even with that 3-game stretch in the middle where you have Florida, LSU, and Georgia, which might be the toughest 3 consecutive weeks any team faces this season. Some interesting things I caught there from Felica when he said all this. The first one, he almost dismisses the Missouri game as a win. And I can promise you right now, that game will be a toss-up out in the desert. It'll be a coin flip. The odds makers have Missouri as a better chance to win the SEC East than Kentucky. They also have Missouri projected to win more games than Kentucky. So Felica is either way up on Kentucky or a non-believer in Missouri. Felica also chalked up the Louisville game as a win. This Desert Classic game of the year, using that term very loosely, had Kentucky -1 over Louisville when it opened. Right now that game sits at a -2. But a game where you're a road favorite of less than a field goal isn't exactly one you can write down as a surefire win in ink. And I do know that Felica is taking Louisville to go under their win total this season, so that might be more of a play against Louisville as much as it is a play on Kentucky. But Felica also dropped a little more knowledge when he said they have a new offensive coordinator at Kentucky who I think will ultimately go with Will Levis, the Penn State transfer at quarterback. And they have some other offensive talent that coaching staff believes in. Well, I'll tell you what, Felica may not get his picks right all the time, but he does have good information. He does have connections. And if he says Will Levis will be the quarterback by the end of the season, I would not bet against that. And did we really see anything from Joey Gatewood last year to make you think he was a 5-win SEC quarterback? One thing I do know for sure about the Kentucky quarterback controversy, if you can call it that, it's better than it was last year with touchback Terry Wilson. That's not me talking. Those are his lousy QBR numbers and Pro Football Focus ratings. Take it with a grain of salt. Felica then wrapped up his Mac Daddy Stogie type picks by saying 6.5 is an all-in play for me to go over on Kentucky. 7, I'm still going to play it because I don't think they're going to go 6-6. You can still push. And here he goes. I still think, more likely than not, Kentucky is an 8-4 team this year. So there you have it. Chris Felica, who makes the point spread picks on the biggest college football stage of them all, every Saturday morning, says Kentucky will finish 8-4 this year. What more do you need? It's time to run to the window double-fisted with hundreds right now, I'm sure. But let's look at this for a minute. How do the odds makers come up with these win totals for these teams? Basically 5 factors. Schedule, who you play and where you play them, and when you play them. Recruiting rankings, returning starters, who's your head coach, who's your quarterback. So like someone else on that biggest college football stage sometimes says, not so fast, my friend. There's no such thing as a favorable schedule in the SEC, and despite the Kentucky recruiting improvements, and that cannot be debated any time that it's been in decades, it's better now. And although the last 3 recruiting classes have averaged 26th best in the nation, they rank 11th in the SEC. But then again, they've recruited better than Missouri, and Missouri is supposed to be better. So what does that really mean? And as we talk on this show all the time, if you bet on Mark Stoops blindly, you've lost a lot. He only hits 46% against the spread in his days at Kentucky. Oh, but that doesn't count the good seasons he's had lately. Oh, does it? Well, that big 10-3 season they had a while back, Stoops went 6-7 against the spread that year. Still not living up to expectations in the desert in that season. So is Stoops really a good coach? You touched on game day in recruiting, absolutely. On game day, on Saturdays, you might want to look a little closer. Quarterback situation, not settled. May well be into the season with 3 guys fighting for one spot. But as you've always heard, if you have 2 or 3 quarterbacks, you don't have any quarterbacks. Outside of that big 3-game stretch of LSU, Florida, and Georgia, you're telling me Kentucky's going to go 8-1 in those games, including not even blinking in literal toss-up games against Missouri and Louisville, and no returning quarterback and a new offensive coordinator, and losing a lot of NFL talent from a 4-6 team last year? Chris Felica make it sound like a done deal, even with those 3 cupcake wins. But 8 wins is a big stretch for this team, and that's the bottom line. ESPN Radio 1300, 92.5. The Bottom Line with Brad Taylor, presented by Stable Duel. Sports talk from a handicapping perspective. Coming up after the break, the most profitable segment at Lexington Radio, our Mac Daddy Stogie picks, and our good friend Vince Stover from the Sports Stove podcast. That's next, right here on ESPN Radio 1300 and 92.5. ESPN Radio 1300, 92.5. Bottom Line with Brad Taylor, presented by Stable Duel. Sports talk from a handicapping perspective. And with us now, he is the host of the Sports Stove podcast. He's our friend Vince Stover. Vince, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on again, Brad.
I appreciate it. Hey, I know you're a big fan of baseball, especially National League Central Baseball. We just talked about the Cincinnati Reds bullpen not exactly being as good as the Nasty Boys of 1990. Reds sitting at 30-31 right now. Now their only decent reliever so far this year, Tejay Antone, now on the injured list. Can this team keep it up with this bullpen as in shambles, the absolute worst pen in Major League Baseball right now?
Yeah, I don't know why you're so hard on the bullpen, Brad. As a Brewers fan, I absolutely love the Reds bullpen.
Yeah, of course you do, yeah.
No, listen, the Reds, they're destined to be 4th in the division. They made some great moves last year before the season to give them an opportunity to win. This year, they went backwards. And then on top of going backwards with the roster, they also, they're supposed to be their best players have kind of gone backwards as well. The Reds, they're sitting around 500 is probably where they're going to be come end of the season. They, maybe 4 or 5 games under 500 by the end of the season. They keep having these good stretches where they win a couple of games or 3 out of 4 or something like that, but then they have these regressions back to where they're supposed to be. So at this point, I think the Reds are sitting right where they're going to end the season, 4th in the division, close to 500, but a little under. I just think that's where they're destined to be by the end of the season.
Eugenio Suarez now batting 6th after that just absolute disaster of a leadoff experiment like they tried with Joey Votto last year. Hitting 163, and here we are in mid-June. Is it time to sit him down? How many days can we still send this guy out there with a 163 batting average, and he's not doing anything?
Well, I mean, who's taking his place? You've got a guy who's had success in the past. He's been a player that's been valuable for Cincinnati in the past. In my opinion, those are the kind of guys you want to stick with and just hope they get out of the slump and get it going again. If it was, even a Joey Votto who's at the tail end of his career, or a young guy that you need to, you got to send back down to the minors and try to figure out what's wrong, that's different. This is a situation where you got a guy that should be kind of in the prime of his career. You're just going to have to work it out. This is where you depend on the coaching staff. You get a guy that figures out what's wrong and make the change in mechanics or whatever it is. All players go through slumps. It's just a matter of how long the slump lasts and what can you do to get them out of it.
ESPN Radio 1300, 92.5. Bottom Line with Brad Taylor, presented by Stable Duel. We're here with Vince Stover of the Sports Stove podcast. Yeah, Suarez is making $10.8 million this year, and his WAR right now is negative 0.8. So they could have just put a mannequin out there and probably had one more win right now. But are you finally on board with me? The Brewers, Central Division champions. There's plenty of room on this bandwagon. I've been preaching it since March. Are you with me now?
Man, I'm cheering, hoping that you're right. I'm not quite there yet.
Oh.
need to see the consistency continue. Listen, the Brewers are talented, and the way the starting pitchers are pitching is incredible, especially the top three in the rotation with Peralta, Burns, and Woodruff. The batting has finally started to come around. They still have only scored 253 runs, and that's close to dead last in the National League. I think it's second or third to last in the fourth. Anyways, they're close to the bottom in runs scored in the National League. So that has to improve in order for them to succeed. The Cubs are actually scoring a lot of runs recently, so they're a little bit more dangerous than I thought they were going to be. I'm closer, and listen, I'm all for it. I'm all for you being right on this one, Brad. But I gotta have to see it close out the way that they're playing right now.
If there's anything I learned from watching the Braves in the 90s up close and personal, you can carry three really good starting pitchers in the regular season. That goes a long way when you got three Maddox, Glavine, and Smoltz type guys. I'm not calling these guys for the Brewers those three, but when you have three dominant starters, you can ride those guys a long way, especially in this division. 92 wins are probably to win this, so I wouldn't mind having those three starters. But let's turn to Kentucky football. We were talking earlier this show. Chris Felica of ESPN says this is an 8-win team. Chris Andrews, who's a sports book director out in the desert, he says he's gotten more buzz on Kentucky football this year than any other school. You're a Kentucky football fan. What do you see this team this year? Do you believe in that 7 wins out in the desert, and they could go over that?
I'm seeing 7 wins. I'm not seeing 8 wins. It's not to say it's impossible, but boy, I mean, I'm looking at the schedule. I can come up with 7 wins, but I struggle to find more than that right now. And I've had some kickback on that already in a conversation with some Kentucky fans. And you're not looking at the schedule. Yeah, I am, and I'm not seeing it, Brad. 7 wins, I think, is a successful season for them this year, and they go over that, then that's a great season for them.
So many people are dismissing the Missouri game as a win, and that's going to be, I can promise you, that's a toss-up game out in the desert. A lot of people, Louisville's down and Kentucky's on the way up. Then why did it start as a 1-point game out in the desert? Why is it only up to 2 now, even with all the buzz on Kentucky? There's a reason why these numbers are as close as they are, because Kentucky these games are not sure things. I more believe in the sure things of them losing to LSU and Georgia and Florida than I am them actually going on the road and beating teams like Mississippi State. Right now, I truly see this team 6-6, and I know you're going to catch a lot of flack for it. They don't have a quarterback returning. You got a new offensive coordinator, and oh, by the way, I just watched the NFL draft. They lost a lot of players to that draft.
Yeah, I mean, we know they've got a good run game. That's no matter who's coaching, that's there. It'll be interesting to see with the new offensive system, what will they do? Will they open it up at all? Because they supposedly have great receivers. We've been told that now for a few years. We've never had a chance to see it. So you talked about the Penn State transfer coming in and being the leader in the house for the quarterback job. What are they going to do with the quarterback? Are they going to let him throw the ball? And if they do, are they going to be any good at it? There's a lot with Kentucky football right now. Offensively, we have no answers to because we have no idea what they're going to be like and how they're going to play. We've been told before, we got an offensive coordinator that's going to open up the offense, and then it didn't happen. So I look at it. I think they win 3 out of the first 4 games. Then they're going to lose all 3, Florida, LSU, Georgia. Then I think out of the last 5 games of the season, I'm seeing 3 wins, 4 wins, maybe, out of the last 5 games of the season. But that's talking about ending the season hot, and I'm not sure that we've ever seen anything from Kentucky football outside of one season. We've never seen any consistency that Kentucky football can close the year on a hot streak.
Right. If you're going to give me that Kentucky loses to LSU, Georgia, and Florida and go 0-3 in those, and I'll give you the 3 cupcake games as well, you're going to tell me that against all those other teams, Kentucky's going to go 8-1 in those games other than LSU, Georgia, and Florida. That's just a big task for a team like Kentucky, who's never won more than 5 more than 50% of their SEC games once in 44 years.
Yeah, and listen, there's a lot of new quarterbacks in the SEC this year, including Mississippi State, Tennessee, Kentucky. And I think all those three teams, Kentucky, Mississippi State, and Tennessee, we don't really know what they are yet. We're not going to know. Tennessee with a new coach who has a history of great offensive performances out of his teams. Kentucky, a new offensive coordinator and a new quarterback. Mississippi State, a new quarterback. It's going to be really intriguing to see what these teams are, and we're not going to know what they are. So you're talking about Mississippi State and Tennessee back-to-back, October, November. Until we see a few games, we're not going to be able to know, can Kentucky compete with them? Are they any good? Is Kentucky better than them? Vanderbilt, sure, we'll give it to you. That's a cupcake, right? New Mexico State, Chattanooga, Louisiana Monroe, sure. It's all there. They can have those games. The rest of them, a little bit's going to be wait and see what these other teams are like, as well as what Kentucky's like with the new system, new quarterback, and kind of how it all comes together. You count on a Mark Stoops team being able to run the football and being able to play defense. But you said it. They lost a lot of talented guys, and some guys I didn't think were that talented to the NFL this year or graduating out. So it's going to be intriguing to see what they are. We're not going to know what Kentucky is probably until that South Carolina game Saturday, September the 25th.
Yeah, you talk about two teams I don't know what to expect in the SEC, Tennessee and South Carolina. I have no idea what to expect from either one of those teams right now. But let's get to the NFL real quick. Speaking of Tennessee, Julio Jones leaves the Falcons, goes to the Titans. He was quoted this week as saying, I've never been a stat guy. Well, I beg to differ with that. Julio Jones to Tennessee. Over under 9 wins now for the Titans. Over under 9 for the season.
Wow. I'm going to go probably right at 9. It's kind of where I'm at. I would be, I'm not a gambler, but I would be hard-pressed to go over. I wouldn't put any money on that stat. I'm on record saying Tennessee will be closer in their record to third place in the division than they will be to first place in the division. I love Julio Jones, think he's a great player. But as far as how he's going to be able to impact their win total, I think it might actually go the wrong direction for fear of them getting out of what they do best. And if you're going to trust Ryan Tannehill, and listen, he's got good stats, but if you're going to trust Ryan Tannehill to lead your team instead of Derrick Henry to lead your team, you're setting yourself up for failure, in my opinion. So that 9 wins is kind of where I'm sitting at with Tennessee right now.
We talk about it almost every time you've come on this spring. The Aaron Rodgers saga. Our good friends at Pro Football Focus have released their projected statistics for individual players for fantasy football this coming season. And Pro Football Focus has Jordan Love to be a better quarterback than Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence and to be one of the top 12 fantasy quarterbacks this season. Agree or disagree, Vince Stover?
Let me come back with you with a question, and then I'll answer your question. Shouldn't a second-year quarterback who's had a year to learn the system be better than a first-year quarterback, especially a quarterback for the Bears? I would say yes. We should expect that out of Jordan Love, to be better than Justin Fields. I think Trevor Lawrence is generational, and I think he's going to be great from the get-go. I love Justin Fields. I think he's going to be a very good quarterback, but in his first year, I struggle with that with no time. Well, not no time, but not much time to learn the system and whatever from there. So Jordan Love should be better than most of the rookie quarterbacks this year, I would say, other than Trevor Lawrence. Top 12 fantasy quarterback, I wouldn't be surprised by that, just by the sense that what the Packers do, what Matt LaFleur does, he sets up these short passes where he can get it into the playmakers' hands and let them do something with it. Lots of touchdowns because they're going to be not necessarily great quarterback touchdowns, just great plays. Aaron Jones out of the backfield, Robert Tonyan short passes over the middle. Devontae Adams is the best, if not top second best receiver in the NFL. So he's got the talent around him and a great offensive line too. It makes sense for him to have success to some degree. And I think if he's top 12 fantasy-wise, that'll be success for sure.
But
do I trust Jordan Love over Rodgers? No way.
But do you see him? Do you still see Rodgers starting opening day?
100%. I've told you, and I've told everybody else. Rodgers will be back. He'll be back with an extension in Green Bay, and it'll happen before the next training camp that happens coming up here. That's mandatory that they could find him if he does. That they have to find him if he doesn't come. They're getting this worked out. It'll be last minute, but Rodgers is back with an extension, and I've said that from the get-go.
NBA playoffs. Are we really looking at a Phoenix-Utah Western Conference Finals?
I hope so. I think it's a great series. You look at these teams, Phoenix, and it's been DeAndre Ayton. He's the whole reason why they've become legit now. Because Booker's been consistent, which he struggled with earlier in his career. He's been consistent. Chris Paul provides leadership and being able to slow the game down a little bit and kind of calm everything at the end. But DeAndre Ayton, his defense and his offense has been so good in the playoffs. That makes them legit contenders now, especially in the Western Conference. Utah and Phoenix, both with great coaching, Snyder and Monty Williams. And Utah, if they can get healthy, Mike Conley Jr. has not been able to play in this series, and they're still winning games. But Utah's a very talented roster. And so, I would love to see that series, Phoenix and Utah. They were the best two teams in the West all season. It makes sense for them to be the final two teams. The Clippers still could come back and do some damage to Utah, but I'd like to see it personally.
I wouldn't sleep on the Clippers done just yet. Everybody's throwing dirt on them after two home losses to start this, or two road losses to start this thing. Tonight, I think they get it done tonight. We might be tipping our hand on our Mac Daddy Stogies. Clippers, they're a favorite with chalky favorites. We love those in the NBA playoffs. Favorites just killing it in the desert in these playoffs. If the Bucks continue and lose this series to Brooklyn, should they just blow everything up and start over there?
It'll start with the coaching change.
Right.
That's what it'll be. It won't be a whole lot of player movement. They'll have to bring in a different coach and try to figure it out. They seem to be pretty predictable right now. Listen, they're playing the Nets. The Nets are the best team in the NBA, at least offensive-wise. They're going to be so hard to match up with. Finally, in their win, the Bucks win, Drew Holiday did his job in containing Kyrie Irving, and that's what they need him to do to earn his contract right now. But the offensive system for the Bucks is it's ugly. They've got to get somebody in there that can control exactly what they need to do offensively. They have the talent to compete, but it's just not. Listen, Coach Budenholzer is a better coach than me, but he's not. It doesn't seem to be the coach to get the job done in Milwaukee. So that's, if you say blow it up by meaning the coaching staff, yes. If you're talking about the players and the roster, no, I think the roster pretty much returns as is.
Real quick, your NBA Finals prediction right now.
I think Brooklyn over Phoenix is what it's looking like at the moment. Brooklyn's so talented. And may I just say how awesome it would be to see Steve Nash and Mike D'Antoni finally get to the championship, and they'll be going against Phoenix. That'd be a pretty cool storyline, I think.
It's Saturday, which usually means it's a big UFC day, and Vince Stover is as good as it gets in picking UFC winners. You've got 60 seconds to give us your UFC picks. Go.
There's no bigger UFC day than today. UFC 263 Adesanya versus Vettori. If you're looking for winners, you go to the top of the card. Israel Adesanya over Vettori, Davison Figueiredo over Brandon Moreno, and Leon Edwards over Nate Diaz. If you're looking for value, you're looking a little bit further down the card. Brad Riddell over Drew Dauber, and Darren Stewart over the Alabama national champion, Eric Anders. Those are the two guys I'd give you to for a little bit of value. But if you're just looking for winners, take the favorites of the top three in the card. It's going to be an incredible fight night tonight. And if you're a fight fan, you're going to enjoy this card, no doubt about it.
He's done nothing on this show but pick UFC winners, so I cannot recommend going with anyone's picks more for UFC. He's Vince Stover of the Sports Stove Podcast. He hosts a UFC podcast along with that. That's part of his selection there on the Sports Stove. Tell us where we can find you on social media.
At Sports Stove on Twitter is the best place to follow me, and we share all the content about our show on there and other sports news and takes. We are not a hot take show, Brad. We just purely give you what is true and what is right, and we think it's great.
He's fighting for the American way, ladies and gentlemen. He's Vince Stover of the Sports Stove Podcast. Vince, as always, we thank you, my friend. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Brad. Enjoyed it.
All right, buddy. That's Vince Stover, Sports Stove Podcast. Make sure to follow him on Twitter and make sure to listen to his podcast. It's great stuff. Hey, we'll come right back, and we'll give you our Mac Daddy Stogie picks. Speaking of making money, we'll do that right after the break, right here on ESPN Radio 1300 and 92.5. ESPN Radio 1300, 92.5. Bottom Line with Brad Taylor, presented by Stable Duel. Sports talk from a handicapping perspective. We thank you for joining us on this Saturday morning. Got a little behind this morning. I started rambling way too much earlier on in this show. I get carried away when it comes to football win totals out in the desert. It's just something you can just talk about for hours and hours on end, apparently. So it's time for our Mac Daddy Stogies. And, of course, it's brought to you by Jake's Cigar Bar at Brandon Crossing. Make sure to go to their website, jakescigarbar.com. And when you go out there, make sure to tell our good friends Jake and Autumn that the Bottom Line sent you. Smoke local, drink local, and cross the line with us at Jake's Cigar Bar, jakescigarbar.com. Get used to hearing this. Phoenix in the Western Conference Finals. They took down Denver last night. Phoenix is headed now. They're going to win this series. What it looks like they might be up against Utah, who is up 2-0 on the Clippers, which was our pre-playoffs pick to make the finals. In the East last night, the Sixers went up 2-1 on the Hawks in typical Atlanta fashion by blowing a chance to win a series at home, of course, and the way they always do in Atlanta. They blow it. By the way, who schedules these games in the NBA playoffs? Obviously, the people who schedule the games are also staying in Atlanta this weekend because this series that played on Friday night, they're not going to start up again until Monday night. So, in other words, buy your stock in Magic City immediately. And, of course, people go for the wings, Just ask Lou Williams. We're going to preach this until people hear us. Favorites in the first and second rounds of this NBA playoffs, 35-19 against the spread, 64.8%. I don't care what trend you play. If you can't cash tickets playing the favorites in the NBA playoffs this year, you're a lost cause, even for this show. And tonight, in a game you can hear right here on ESPN Radio 1392.5, Game 3, Jazz and Clippers. Jazz up 2-0. Clippers, 4.5-point favorite. If you believe in the favorites in the playoffs like we do, if you're an old schooler, believes in the old zigzag theory, here's a game for you. If you think Donovan Mitchell was cursed by playing for Rick Pitino at Louisville, this is also a game for you. You'll be on the Clippers just like us tonight. We're going to take the chalky favorite as we've done the whole playoffs and cashed in. Clippers over the Jazz tonight in Game 3 of the series. Lay the 4.5, take the chalky favorites. Major League Baseball tonight. There's some value, a little bit. Pittsburgh, Mets, Cardinals, they have some value. Two that we like. The Tigers. They are big underdogs against the White Sox. Dylan Cease for the White Sox, 3.36 ERA. Jose Urena for the Tigers, 4.25, but he's their best starting pitcher. I'm getting value with the Tigers tonight. The White Sox used their entire bullpen last night. Tigers only used a couple guys, not their entire bullpen. We'll take the Tigers getting some value tonight. And another game we like. Do you like to gamble? I mean really gamble. The Texas Rangers are 20-40. They're playing at the LA Dodgers, who are 38-25, the defending World Series champion. Dodgers, huge, minus 300-plus favorite. Trevor Bauer going for the Dodgers. And some guy named Colby Allard going for the Rangers. We're taking the Rangers tonight. Getting plus 300-plus value out in the desert. Huge underdogs. Biggest underdog on the board today by a mile. Getting a lot of value going against Trevor Bauer today. That's what we're looking at, value. Do we think the Rangers could really beat him? No. But you're going to give us 3-1 against Trevor Bauer and a kid for the Rangers who's got a 1.1 whip on the season? Yeah, we'll take some of that. Throw a little pizza money on the Rangers tonight. So there you go, our Mac Daddy Stokers tonight. Clippers, that's our play of the day. Clippers out in the NBA. And then if you want to just put a little pizza money on some baseball, Tigers over White Sox, and big-time gamblers, Rangers over Dodgers. Those are your Mac Daddy Stogies. You can take those bad boys to the desert and Jake's Cigar Bar at Brandon Crossing and smoke them. We want to thank you for joining us here on the Bottom Line here this morning. Make sure to email us anytime, bottomlinelex@gmail.com, or follow us on Twitter. Bottom Line at Bottom Line Lex. And as always, until the next time, tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, may the winners be yours.